Okay, guys, let's talk about happiness. The thing that makes us all happy. Yep, that's a little circular logic for you. Alright, so happiness comes with positive thinking, and there is a lot of power in positive thinking. Research has showed that people who think more positively about their future, their control in their outcomes, and their willingness to share with others are healthier than people who think less positively about these things. So, positive thinking can have a direct impact on your health, similar to stress. And self efficacy can have a direct impact on happiness, and so can positivity. What self efficacy is the belief in our ability to carry out actions that produce our desired outcomes. So it's believing in yourself. It's believing that you can do what you want to do and you will get what you want to get. So believing that if you try out for that sports team, you will get on the sports team. And people with high self efficacy respond to stressors in an active and constructive way. So this is the good way to respond to stressors. This is the good coping mechanism. So they use that action driven way and in a constructive way. So it's not destructive, it's making it so the stressor does not add any more negativity to their life. They actually spin it to be a positive in their life. And this includes how they do this is by getting information, talking to friends, and attempting to face and reduce their difficulties. People with higher self-efficacy are more likely to do these things than people with low efficacy. And these are things that are really good to reduce stress and therefore increase positivity in your life. And then this leads us to believe that we can better control potential stressors that could affect us. When we are able to respond to these stressors and reduce them in this way, then we feel like we have more control over our lives and over how we can handle these stressors. So this actually leads us to a cognitive bias that I am calling the happiness cognitive bias. This is not the technical term for it, but this does kind of go along with what we're saying. The technical term for it is the illusion of control. So you think we have this tendency to overestimate the ability to control an event. So we think we have more control over something than we actually do. So, for instance, with people with high self-efficacy, they think they have more control over stressors than they actually do. They have this high illusion of control bias. So an example of this could be people think they're choosing their lottery numbers will make them more likely for them to win rather than just getting numbers at random. People like to choose their own numbers because they feel like they have more control over the situation and they think it makes it more likely to win. When in reality, if you got random numbers versus you choosing your own numbers, it's pretty much the same exact probability that you're going to win, which is very, very low. What's really interesting about this, which makes it kind of more interesting and kind of more on the premise of the happiness cognitive bias, is that people with depression don't show this cognitive bias. In studies where they have had a group of people that are clinically depressed and a group of people who are not, and they test them on whether they have this bias. The people who are depressed show very little impairment on that task, whereas the people who are not depressed do show having this bias. They think that they have way more control over the task, where the depressed people are not fooled. Could this mean that depressed people have low self-efficacy? Or maybe they just have feelings of no control in their environment. So the illusion of control doesn't work because it's an overestimate of the ability to control an event. So if they feel like there's no control, they wouldn't show this. So does that really mean ignorance is bliss? Or at least, is bias bliss? Oh, the big question. Can money buy happiness? Actually, kind of, yeah, kind of. But to an extent. Emotional well-being actually has been found to continue to rise as income rises. But it stops rising at around $75,000 per year. That income is like the peak of happiness, and then you don't get any happier after that. So if you're below that, yes, you can keep going and getting more happier as your income rises, but once you're at $75,000 a year, you're as happy as it gets. And what they call this is the happiness plateau. So there is a limit to happiness, and it has a direct relationship with money. And this is further supported because the average income in the United States has increased over the years, but they've also measured the average level of happiness, and that has not increased over the years. So even if someone who was being paid $75,000 per year back in 1980 is now getting paid $100,000 per year now, they would still have the same happiness. So this is a graph, it's kind of a crazy one, of showing that the annual income, so 10,000, 20,000, 40,000, 80,000, 160, and how that is related to the population experiencing positive affect. That's the one we're going to focus on. So this is like 50%, 60%, 70, 80, 90. So as you can see, positive affect is another word for happiness, or feeling happy. And at 10%, it's lowest, around 70%, and then it keeps growing and growing, and then right around here, it kind of stops growing. And that is around the $75,000 range. So there's no more growth after that. And then this is plotting out the years. And the blue line is income per capita, where the red line is happiness score. So as income has steadily increased, happiness has stayed the same. So why am I not always happy? Why is happiness fleeting? Why does it go away? Why do I have to be sad sometimes and happy other times? Well, it's because people adapt quickly. Whether it's a positive event or negative, whether it's a positive feeling or a negative feeling, we quickly come back to normal. That is our natural tendency. It's kind of like a pendulum. We swing one way, but we always come back to the center. So, for instance, say I eat one piece of chocolate, and that's really rewarding. I really like that piece of chocolate. Then I eat a second piece, and it's pretty rewarding. I still really enjoy it. Then I eat a third piece, and it's fine. It's a little less rewarding. It's the same chocolate, you know? All right. We habituate. Habituation. So each presentation becomes more and more normal of the thing that makes us happy. And therefore, it makes it less and less rewarding. So people who won more than $50,000 in a lottery reported that they weren't happier than they were in the past. They got used to it. And they weren't happier than a control group that never won the lottery. They habituated to that money. But the same is true for negative affect. If this is kind of a bummer that happiness doesn't last. But the good news is it's true for sadness and anger and fear and anxiety too. All things pass. You might have longer instances, but it's temporary. Happiness is temporary, and sadness is temporary. Individuals paralyzed as a result of car accidents are not as unhappy as you might expect. They get used to it. Yes, at first, people with $50,000 from a lottery are ecstatic, but then they get used to it. And people who are paralyzed after an accident are torn up. They are so sad. But they get used to it. They learn their new way of life. And we come back to center. We might have a new center now, but that pendulum always swings back. And it's important to know that happiness is relative. It's all based on comparison, which it can be dangerous. So we compare our situation to similar situations around us. So an example of this could be, I have 5 candy bars, and yesterday I had 2. That makes me super happy. I gained more. Woohoo! But you could have the same amount of candy bars today, but then yesterday you had 10. So you went down. That's kind of a bummer. That's not nearly as good. So the first instance would make you a lot happier than the second. It's relative. But what's really important about this is making comparisons against other people often leads to unhappiness. This can be really toxic. You want to stick to comparing yourself to your past self. You want to compare the situation rather than you against another person. Because against another person is really dangerous. It's extremely rare to be the best at something. So if you keep continually comparing yourself against people, you'll never add up, and that will never make you happy. So, for instance, this is a way to compare yourself to yourself and try to do self-improvement. This is okay. This is a good way to go. So I got a B on my test. That's a pretty good score. I did better than I did last time. Or you could think, I got a B on my test and Barry got a C. I'm glad I did better. That's not a good way to think. That makes you super competitive, and I'm not sure Barry would appreciate your feelings about that. And this one is really bad for your mental well-being. I got a B on my test, but Barry got an A. I'm so stupid. No, you did better than you did last time. That's good. Be happy.